Hello, property navigators. Follow the infrastructure has long been a catchphrase for residential property investors because of the flow-on effects major projects can have on property values. But plenty of investors make the mistake of buying into the hype without properly understanding it first. They assume that better roads, schools, and facilities will automatically boost the value of their property. However, it just doesn't quite work like that. With the federal budget having a $120 billion 10-year infrastructure pipeline, and with the government recently adding an extra $16.5 billion to that figure, you need to be across what such projects might mean for you. What is infrastructure? In the context of buying property, infrastructure refers to all the physical systems in a region, such as transportation and electrical systems, communication networks, water and sewage systems, shopping centres, roads, hospitals, and schools. These systems contribute towards creating jobs and servicing the need of the local community. So they are vital considerations when choosing a property location. Now there's two aspects to infrastructure. One, infrastructure that is currently in place in a suburb and makes it desirable. And two, infrastructure that is planned to be built which may impact property values. Quite simply, infrastructure that is currently in place in a suburb relates to what is there in the here and now, adding to the current desirability of an area. But what I want to talk about today is the possible impacts of planned infrastructure. Before we look at the local effects on property, it's important to note that infrastructure has a significant impact on the wider economy. Nearly all projects require construction and provide good paying jobs. They also deliver a pipeline of work for businesses countrywide, as varied as electrical parts suppliers, heavy vehicle sales, consultants, and urban planners. In fact, federal budget papers from 2019 revealed that 37% of Australia's growth could be slated back to infrastructure undertaken by the New South Wales and Victorian governments. Signs of infrastructure development and growth highlight a strengthening region. As more people begin to call a region home, more funding goes into creating and maintaining the infrastructure needed to keep the population serviced and happy. While it's a well-used strategy to follow the infrastructure trail and buy a property that lies in the path of progress, not every infrastructure project positively impacts property values. Infrastructure projects impact property values primarily through three different ways. Accessibility and connectivity. Enhanced transportation infrastructure improves accessibility, making regions more attractive for residents and businesses, thereby increasing property demand and values. 2. Economic growth. Large projects typically bring employment opportunities, attracting a larger population and boosting demand for housing and commercial spaces. And 3. Improved amenities. Development of modern infrastructure often leads to better utilities, recreational areas, and public services, increasing the desirability of an area. When analysing the potential impact of infrastructure in an area, factors beyond physical amenities need to be taken into account. The overall contribution that planned infrastructure will make to a community and how it meets people's needs beyond the construction phase must be carefully considered. So this means factoring the number of jobs a project creates during the construction stage and also the benefit to the economy of the town or city by how many ongoing employment opportunities it leads to. If you are looking for a quick way to characterise projects, I like to categorise them into three main categories. Number 1, utilities. This will include electricity, gas, communications, and water. 2, transport, train stations, freeways, roads, airports, etc. And 3, social, schools, hospitals, shopping centres, dining opportunities, and the like. But then you must filter the projects to find those that are most likely to influence local property prices. A model you can use here is the great, the good, and the indifferent. The indifferent includes projects like the upgrading of the electrical grid to accommodate renewable power. Whilst it's a worthy project, it likely won't have any ongoing localised impacts on property. The best examples of the good include major health centre upgrades or civic rejuvenation projects. They're good primarily because they attract more workers to a location, especially renters. And the great are some transport projects. The right projects can transform an area, driving a gentrification process that can last for a decade or more. But I need to point out that increased accessibility doesn't automatically translate to increased property values. On the great side of the argument, some roads and transport projects that add a lot of value, reduce travel time and improve traffic conditions, helping people get from A to B in shorter periods of time. For example, it is well established in the data that areas with train lines that that make accessibility easy have a positive impact on property prices. But to the opposite, a major road building project will likely create a significant number of jobs and demand for housing during the construction phase. But this may not necessarily continue once building has been completed. And even with the new state-of-the-art freeway, some outer suburbs remain over an hour's drive away from where people need to work, which is an unappealing hike for most people. Properties generally get more expensive as you move closer to a CBD or city. A key reason for this is cities are large employment hubs and there's a demand for people to live near where they work. But just don't think about CBDs here. There are other employment hubs such as new hospitals, schools, universities, airports and shopping precincts that tend to create jobs both while they're being constructed and then into the future, driving ongoing demand for renters and buyers to live nearby. Infrastructure can also bring a large or different population demographic to an area. For example, major developments such as technology parks might bring the influx of a skilled workforce into an area, so certainly keep that in mind too. Now, be careful buying into an area during the hype or the announcement of an infrastructure project. While this puts you ahead of the curve to attain imminent price surges, it can also expose you to risks, such as the project failing to push through or it just being canned altogether. It's important to understand the difference between planned and realised infrastructure. Many things can happen to prevent planned infrastructure developments from finally going ahead, so it's important to know how far advanced proposed developments are in terms of approvals and planning permission before investing in a particular suburb or district. The most common categories are: number 1, underway; number 2, committed; number 3, planned; and number 4, possible. Each of these 4 categories are very different, with possible being something that's just an idea and underway being something that is getting built in the current stage. So make sure you do your research. And remember, price rises from infrastructure aren't reflected immediately, but over time, and some areas could even be negatively impacted. While infrastructure is designed to benefit the community at large, proximity certainly is the key. No one wants to live next to a noisy and unsightly energy station, nor within 1.6 kilometres of a pollution-prone landfill site. Highways can be a huge plus if they provide greater connectivity, but they definitely aren't desirable if you're listening to the traffic rattling past from your bedroom window, which would also detract in value. The same goes for rail. For example, Melbourne's level crossing removal project, which elevated rail lines overhead. Now, it's been overwhelmingly popular within the broader community, except for those who now have them towering above their properties. An example of good infrastructure is the Inland Rail project, going from Melbourne to Brisbane. Now, this $15 billion project is the biggest of the big-ticket infrastructure projects in Australia, set to impact property markets over the long term. The Inland Rail project is a 1,700-kilometre freight rail line currently under construction and set to be completed in 2027. It will connect Melbourne and Brisbane, running inland via regional Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland, covering 36 local government areas. This project will transform how goods are moved around Australia and is designed to fill in the missing links in Australia's rail supply chain, getting goods to consumers faster and more reliably. A big project like this has multiple impacts. When it is being built, it creates a lot of economic activity and jobs, with local businesses getting contracts, etc. So the flow-on effect is more services being required because there will be new people coming to the areas where it's being built, and they're probably going to need somewhere to rent. Then, when construction is finished, it's going to impact economic activity by bringing more commerce to the places that have stops along the way. More jobs will be created through food manufacturing, logistics and warehousing, and local businesses will benefit from all the extra activity in the towns. This is projected to have a flow-on effect to the property market by creating demand for real estate, not just during the construction, but well into the future. First and foremost, investors should look at areas that best fit what they're looking for in terms of yields, affordability and pricing, and then, and only then, factor in potential improvements, including infrastructure. Do your due diligence by checking government planning and zoning information to mitigate risks. Stay informed about government pledges. Avoid speculation and don't get seduced by talk of the next growth corridor, new satellite city, or proposed rezoning. Planning can be highly contentious and unpredictable. If you believe the hype too early, what was once slated for a new residential plot may remain a semi-industrial site for years to come. Be alert to the risk of mothballing. Even once a new zone has been confirmed, buying into greenfield sites is risky. Factor in temporary price spikes. Even when infrastructure is finally built, it often provides a sugar hit to prices before they eventually fall back in line with their prior trajectory. Oversupply can occur when infrastructure is built in new greenfield locations, opening up large tracts of land that can lead to a glut of properties on the market. And ask yourself the question, could the long-term changes from the infrastructure lead to changes in zonings? This can be helpful when identifying suburbs with future growth potential. Prior to buying an investment property, you need to factor in a range of drivers for property growth. Don't just roll the dice expecting an infrastructure project to deliver. Rather, see it as one of a number of factors that go into a balanced approach. With billions of dollars being invested in various infrastructure projects across Australia, there is no doubt the country's economy will benefit as a result. But remember, only incorporate good and great infrastructure projects into your thinking. Better yet, give us a call to get some advice before taking the plunge. Our number is just down in the description. Until next time, happy property navigating.